All right, let's jump into this deep dive, shall we? And today we're looking at a story about a museum heist. Um, well, maybe not entirely about the heist itself, but more about the choices that the main character ends up making.
Yeah, really a fascinating look at what happens when ambition and vulnerability kind of sort of collide in someone's life, you know?
Right, it's like, what would you do in this situation? So we've got Mia, our protagonist, and she's a museum curator, super dedicated to her job. So dedicated, in fact, that she discovers this security flaw. But here's the kicker. No one seems to care.
And that feeling of being overlooked, undervalued, that's going to play a huge role in how she reacts to what happens
Oh,
next.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Because then we have Leo, this mysterious, and I'll be honest, kind of charming guy. And he approaches Mia with a proposition, right? He knows about the security flaw, and he wants to use it to pull off this heist. But knowing how dedicated Mia is to the museum, you'd think this would be a hard pass for her.
Yeah, you'd think so. I mean, she even points out, like, hey, this is illegal. But Leo's approach is clever. He doesn't just focus on the money, on a quick payday. He taps into that feeling Mia has of being unappreciated at the museum.
Almost like he's reading her mind and then using it against her.
Exactly. It's almost textbook manipulation, you know what I mean? And even though Mia initially resists, she can't shake off his words. It's like he's planted a seed of doubt. Like, is she really getting what she deserves?
And I have to say, the way the story captures that internal struggle is amazing. Those descriptions of the quiet museum halls where Mia works, even the sound of her nervously sipping coffee as she meets with Leo,
Yeah.
you feel the weight of this decision she's wrestling with.
Yeah, it really makes you wonder, if Mia were truly happy at work, would Leo's offer even stand a chance? Or is it her situation, her circumstances, that make her vulnerable to his pitch?
That's a great point. Now let's talk about Leo for a second. He clearly has a knack for planning this kind of thing, but there's something shady about him, almost like a hidden past.
Right. And the source material hints at that too. Like, he might have a pretty interesting backstory, if you know what I mean. But what I find interesting is the contrast between the confidence he projects and what we see beneath the surface. Like, his apartment, it's described as this total mess, chaotic. And there's a moment where he thinks about his past heists, almost like he misses being younger, maybe more reckless, definitely more sure of himself.
Yeah, almost like he's trying to convince himself he can still pull this off perfectly. But some anxieties are creeping in, especially when he starts to doubt whether Mia can handle the pressure.
Which, think about it, that's revealing. It means that, despite his act, Leo really needs Mia for this heist to work. It adds another layer of tension to their partnership, right?
For sure. Okay, so they start planning, and it is meticulous. Blueprints, guard schedules, even setting up a distraction. Their little cafe hangout basically turns into heist headquarters.
Like a business partnership, a very, very illegal business partnership. Each of them brings something to the table. But the deeper they get into the plan, the more these red flags about Leo start popping up for Mia, like his vague answers about his past.
Yeah, you got to wonder, how does he know so much about the museum security to begin with? I'd be having second thoughts for sure. But then it's the night of the heist. The atmosphere is electric.
The way it describes the silence of the museum and you can feel Mia's nervousness,
Yeah,
it's masterful. You're right there with her.
absolutely. Those dim security lights, the sound of her heart pounding, it
Yeah.
just builds the suspense. But then there's this unexpected noise, a little warning sign maybe, that things might not go as planned.
And of course they don't, because as they're about to escape, we get this flashback to a heist that went bad for Leo in Paris. He was in charge then too, but the alarm went off. He barely got away, had to escape through some underground tunnels, leave his team behind.
Yeah, and it's this haunting memory that shaped how he's approaching this heist with Mia. The feeling that he can only rely on himself.
Which makes his betrayal of Mia even more shocking. They've just pulled off the heist and he turns on her, reveals his true motives, like a total gut punch.
But here's where it gets interesting. Mia doesn't just fall apart. She's been watching, learning. She pulls out her own gun, catches Leo off guard.
It's fantastic. It's like the tables have turned. This quiet curator just outsmarted a career criminal. And that's where we'll leave it for now. I'm excited to get into what happens next in part 2.
Okay, so we're back, and last time we left Mia, she's standing there in the street, right, with that stolen mask, having just outsmarted Leo. What a cliffhanger.
Totally. It leaves you wondering, like, what is she thinking at that moment?
Right, like what's going through her head.
Probably a mix of everything, relief, anger, maybe a little fear about what's next. Don't forget, she was drawn into this whole thing because she wanted a new life. To escape that feeling of being stuck.
But is this golden mask, is it really the ticket to the kind of freedom she wants? Seems risky.
That's the big question. And the story kind of hints at the potential downsides of this kind of life. Remember when Leo was reflecting on his own past? That anxiety that followed him everywhere didn't exactly sound like a happy ending.
He even said this is supposed to be his last heist. But it's like he can't escape it. Do you think that's what's waiting for Mia too?
It's possible, for sure, and something she's going to have to think about carefully. Even if she manages to sell the mask, disappear, can she really escape the guilt, the fear of getting caught, knowing she betrayed everything she believed in?
Yeah, that's a lot to carry with you.
Yeah.
But before we get too far ahead, I want to go back to that betrayal scene. The way it's written is so powerful. 1 minute they're partners, the next Leo's pulling a gun, total 180.
I know. And it's so unexpected. Because up until then, Leo's been the one calling the shots, the mastermind.
Yeah.
But in that moment, it's Mia who takes control.
And it's not just the gun, it's the look in her eyes, the way she tells him to back off. You see the strength in her, like maybe she didn't even know she had it.
Right. And that makes you realize this story, it's not just about the heist, it's about how Mia changes. She starts out feeling overlooked, underestimated. But through this whole ordeal, she finds a resilience, a strength she didn't know was there.
She was pushed to the edge and then boom, she breaks through. But that strength comes at a price. She's a fugitive now, on the run with this stolen artifact. Her life is changed forever, and the path ahead, totally unclear. So what happens next?
Well, the source material leaves that up in the air, which is frustrating, but also so intriguing. Does she try to sell the mask, start over somewhere new? Does she turn herself in, hope for leniency? Or is there another option we haven't even thought of?
Right. So many possibilities. It's
Oh,
like the
yeah.
story wants us to become the storytellers now. What ending would we write for Mia, knowing what we know about her?
Love that idea. It shows how powerful a good story can be. It sparks our imagination, leaves us wanting more.
It's like a seed has been planted, and we get to watch it grow in our minds. But as we think about Mia's future, I think it's worth going back to the bigger themes here. Temptation, taking risks for a better life, trust, betrayal, all of that.
Definitely. Why do you think a story about a museum heist resonates with people so much?
Well, at its core, it's about choices we make when life throws us a curveball. What would we do in Mia's shoes? Would we be tempted by the same things? What lines would we be willing to cross?
It forces us to look inward. What are our values? What are the consequences of our actions?
And even though the story is pretty extreme, we can relate to Mia. Her struggles, her vulnerabilities, her strength. She's searching for a life that feels real, fulfilling. It reminds us that even in crazy situations, it's the human element that really grabs us.
And that life is unpredictable, full of twists and turns. How we navigate those, that's what shapes who we are. Before we wrap up this part, I want to ask you, the listener, something. Do you think Mia could have had a good life without turning to crime? Was there another path? One with less risk?
That's a great question to think about. Maybe her skills, her passion could have been recognized somewhere else. Maybe this crazy experience, maybe she needed it to wake up to her own strength. The story leaves it open.
And that's the beauty of it. It doesn't give us easy answers. It lets us grapple with these complex ideas, human motivation, what we do when we're looking for happiness, for fulfillment.
Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive. We saw Mia change from this, meticulous curator to, well, a pretty cunning thief, all because of this tempting offer, and then that betrayal by Leo. So now the big question, what happens to Mia?
Yeah, it really stays with you, doesn't it? And it's interesting, the source material doesn't give us a clear answer. It's open to interpretation. We can imagine different paths for her.
That's one of the things I love about this story. It's like, we get to be the writers now. Knowing what we know about her, where do you think she goes from here?
Well, let's see. Mia could disappear completely, right? Use that stolen mask, start a new life, far away from the museum, the memories, all of it. The classic escape to a tropical island fantasy.
Oh, I love that. Tempting, for sure. A clean slate, new identity, complete anonymity. But would she be happy? Remember Leo, he tried that, and it seemed like it just caused him more anxiety, not peace.
Exactly. Running away doesn't erase the past, She'd still have that weight on her. The fear of getting caught, the guilt. Makes you wonder, can she find peace without running?
Maybe she goes in a different direction. Turns herself in. Tries to make a deal, return the mask for a lighter sentence. At least that way she's taking responsibility. Trying to rebuild her life, honestly.
It's possible, shows she wants redemption, realizing that real freedom means facing your mistakes, not hiding from them, but it also means consequences. Maybe jail time, being labeled a thief. Tough decision.
No easy answers there. Every option has its challenges. But there's another path we haven't talked about. What if Mia goes after Leo? Not for revenge, but to expose him, clear her name.
Ooh, interesting. That would use that strength, that resourcefulness she discovered during the heist. It wouldn't be about her anymore, but about justice. For herself, and for anyone else Leo might have tricked.
Like she's taking back control,
Right.
using her skills to right a wrong. And who knows, maybe along the way she discovers a passion she never knew she had, becomes a detective, an art recovery expert, something like that. Maybe this whole crazy experience leads her to a totally unexpected path.
Absolutely. It reminds us that even when things seem bad, there's always a chance to find a new purpose. That's what makes this story so good. It doesn't tell us what to think, it lets us explore human nature, those tough choices we all face.
So what do you think? What's the big takeaway from our deep dive into this story?
For me, it's that our choices have consequences. They don't just affect us, they affect everyone around us too. Mia's choice to go along with the heist, it had consequences for her and for Leo. Even when we think we're doing the right thing, our choices can have unexpected ripple effects.
Yeah, that's a good point. It also makes you think about how important it is to be self-aware, to understand what motivates you, what makes you vulnerable. Like, Mia was drawn to Leo's offer because she felt overlooked, underappreciated. It's a good reminder to address our own needs in healthy ways, to find validation and fulfillment from sources that, fit with our values.
And maybe the biggest thing is this story encourages us to embrace uncertainty. Life doesn't always have easy answers. We're going to face dilemmas, tough choices, and sometimes we just have to trust our gut, make the best decision we can.
Right, and that's what makes life interesting, isn't it? The ups and downs, the twists and turns, all of it makes us who we are. And on that note, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into this incredible story about art, ambition, and the choices we make when life throws us a curveball.
We hope you enjoyed exploring this story with us and that it gets you thinking and talking. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.